Living aboard a United States aircraft carrier is not easy. The constant focus on combat readiness is only rivaled by the sound F/A-18 Super Hornets and Growlers repeatedly taking off or landing on the flight deck. But one day a year is when all this changes, and as daunting and intimidating as an aircraft carrier seems, it transforms into one of the closest things to home a sailor could wish for. This is Thanksgiving, a day that even the United States Navy tries to make as special as possible for sailors and give them something extra that brings home to the middle of the ocean. So, how does things change? And what can the United States Navy possibly do to bring home to the middle of the ocean? Days before Thanksgiving, everything starts in the galley. Navy culinary specialists coordinate with teams to have specific items delivered to the ship. This usually happens as part of UNREP, or underway replenishment, which the Navy will use to restock the vessel every few days. Once these items are delivered, ranging from food and other recreational activities we'll get to in a second, the hard work begins. Sailors help to unload the new stock, and it gets put in refrigeration units, usually below the galley. Using small elevators, the food is usually moved to the galley, where the real magic will take place. Starting at 300 hours each morning, teams operate within the galley, where they begin to cut meats and process vegetables. Heavy-duty equipment takes over mixing batches of dough, which will later be transformed into fresh bread rolls. But this happens each morning. The only difference is that preparations for Thanksgiving meals begin a few days earlier. The main reason for this is to ensure that a well-coordinated approach is taken to ensure every sailor gets a fresh meal, perfectly cooked, regardless of whether they are on duty or if they have some free time. It can take quite a while to feed the almost 6,000 passengers you find working aboard a Nimitz vessel. On the day of Thanksgiving, the team of culinary specialists wake up early, and duty again begins at around 3 a.m. While many of the sailors are still sleeping, the cooks already take to the kitchen, preparing everything from turkey to roasts, which needs to be served perfectly fresh and at the optimal temperatures. By the time sailors wake, it is usually breakfast as normal, giving the cooks a little extra time to ensure the meals are perfect. These are transferred to high specialized food serving units, which focus on keeping everything warm and fresh. By the time lunch rolls around, it is a special moment, and while a speech can occasionally be expected from the commanding officer or any of the other chiefs, sailors simply want to dig in. And that is exactly what they do, as most of the crew, who are not on duty, will retreat to the mess halls to get their hands on some of these meals. In fact, each mess hall, spread along the center line of the carrier, needs to coordinate in such a way that all meals are served at the exact same time. This can be tricky, as many sailors might be on duty, working various essential jobs and remaining combat ready. This sends a clear signal to enemies of the United States that regardless of the day or time, an aircraft carrier strike group is not to be messed with. In fact, the Navy still conducts various sorties, and pilots still take off to ensure they are combat ready. Meanwhile, in the mess hall, sailors will continue to enjoy the festivities, even being treated with special desserts that provide that extra feeling of home that might be needed to get someone through the day. But what about those who are still on duty? Working aboard a U.S. aircraft carrier is quite a stressful job. Shifts can be broken down into 6 or 8 hours. Usually the higher you rank, the more responsibilities you have. Those in charge of communications, radars, defense systems, and the nuclear power plant which powers this vessel cannot simply be turned off for a couple of hours. Engineers need to work long and arduous shifts, but special food delivery services, organized by the sailors themselves. These services work to ensure that every sailor is treated to a nice Thanksgiving meal and will be able to enjoy as much of the festivities as is possible from deep below the deck. With the engineers are the radar control specialists and defense administrators, who also receive the same treatment and who also need to get some of the service from the delivery service. Timing is absolutely essential. and asking almost any Navy specialist will reveal that cooks take extra care to ensure that meals are perfectly prepared and everyone is accommodated. After all, running an aircraft carrier cannot be done by one man and requires a concerted effort. As for the captain and chiefs, they usually have a dining area fitted for a king. The CO might be able to enjoy a decent meal with the other high-ranking officials, but instead of work, many men find themselves reminiscing about the times back home or talking about their families. Yes, the Navy fully understands this and tries to put in as much effort as possible to create a conducive environment where sailors could possibly spend some time with their families. So, how does the Navy make it even possible for sailors to effectively communicate with these family members? One thing you'd find aboard a Navy vessel is the internet. Yes, these vessels usually have access to the internet through various encrypted services. The radar and defense systems also operate using these features, which ensures that communications are always open. But with such a large volume of people who want to talk to family members, it becomes a waiting game and can often take some time for you to talk to your wife. Unfortunately, the Navy cannot simply just turn off the defense systems, which are highly critical, especially during these periods where sailors might be dropping their guard for a few hours. By the end of the day, each sailor will have had the opportunity to talk with friends and family back home, helping to keep the morale strong and improving the Thanksgiving experience for the individual. As part of the communications is the increased stock of comfort items found in the ship's cafeteria. Yes, sailors are given access to an onboard shop which sells various quality of life items and some trinkets that could be sent back home. But postcards used to be the big seller on these festive days as sailors, even before Thanksgiving would focus on writing mail to family members back home. This usually finds its way to the United States via the UNR-EP missions that bring new supplies to the vessel. Now, this seems rather intriguing, but recent advances in technology might make Thanksgiving aboard a carrier and away from the family even better in the next few years. The use of holographic images is one of the new proposed ideas, and this will enable sailors to enjoy Thanksgiving meals with their family members. It might be a little tricky, given the fact that about 6,000 sailors will want to enjoy this luxury, but it will certainly lead to a few quality of life improvements. Fortunately, low-orbit satellite technologies like Starlink have now become widespread, and this means that soldiers can communicate with their family members on a more frequent basis. But aside from the food, what else does the Navy do on these special days? As mentioned, the Navy pulls out all the stops when it comes to giving sailors a little bit of freedom and to make them feel like home in the middle of the ocean. Communal areas usually transform into movie theaters with marathons running, and various gaming areas will also be afforded for sailors to enjoy playing games on the various consoles. This might not seem like much, but it completely transforms the mood of the area, and this enables sailors to kick back and relax a little bit. Moreover, various elements of the carrier will also transform into something that is far better for those aboard. The gyms or fitness areas might have holiday-themed challenges, while many aboard the vessel might even transform some of the corridors to represent the holiday that is being celebrated. Even Christmas lights can be found waving in the corridors to create a feeling of being at home. Aboard the flight deck, things go as planned with various missions often taking off. But one thing that is very special is when the sailors are permitted to have celebratory barbecues and other get-togethers that could transform everything into one big party. No alcohol will be present, as this is still a part of the United States Navy, and not a cruise ship as it might feel like on this special day. These celebrations can last the entire day before everything kicks back into action, and the sailors need to make sure they are ready for whatever mission they are deployed to complete. But what about remaining combat ready? When you are sailing aboard a United States aircraft carrier in the Red Sea, or even through the Taiwan Strait, danger lurks around every corner. Numerous situations have occurred where carriers often need to deal with enemies, or they need to respond to a call that requires the use of the aircraft transported by the vessel. This means that the aircraft carrier needs to always be combat ready, and this cannot be compromised on, not even for something as big as Thanksgiving. The Navy continues to operate as usual, with sailors being stationed to their posts. The radar and defense rooms are occupied by specialists, who keep on monitoring, while treating it like some kind of threat might be inbound. Weaponry is still permanently active, and the radar systems need to operate fully to ensure that everything is fully in order should something kick off at any moment. One thing that might be a little bit of a downside is how active troops will be when they've just eaten a whole meal and now need to get ready for some kind of operation. But this does happen, and occasionally, the Navy will be incapable of creating these special moments when the mission doesn't allow it. Some missions force the sailors to give up some of these luxuries as they will need to perform their duties. But this usually doesn't mean that Thanksgiving is merely skipped over. If this happens, the Navy usually still holds a Thanksgiving dinner, but it is pushed back a few days. The day is still treated the same, and upon orders from the commanding officer, a day will be selected, which is treated as Thanksgiving. The sailors will be treated with the exact same luxuries and quality of life improvements, including receiving their special Thanksgiving meal that could just easily put a smile on the faces of those who have been operating while the rest of the country was celebrating this special day. So, what meals can these sailors expect on Thanksgiving? While you might think that food could be scarce aboard one of these vessels, or that sailors are restricted to what they can get, this simply isn't the case. In fact, many aircraft carriers serve meals that are far better than you'd find at your local restaurant. The Navy also uses fresh ingredients with a lot of emphasis being placed on nutrition. Essentially, about 1,600 pounds of protein is served with about 350 pounds of produce and hundreds of gallons of milk. Turkey is usually the staple food for Thanksgiving, as it should be back home. However, sailors can often be treated to roasts and other delicacies if the stock is available. This is supplemented with a decent number of vegetables like corn on the cob, green bean casserole, and even odd salad. Sailors can indulge in as much as they like, as these cooks tend to cook up quite the feast before proceedings kick off. However, once all the meals have been prepared, it is time for dessert with various pies, donuts, and other pastries making up the bulk of the sweet meals that make it to the mess hall. Unfortunately, not everyone might enjoy all these meals, which potentially leads to some problems of a religious nature. Fortunately, the carrier accommodates everyone, and even those who cannot eat certain meals will be specially catered for, allowing them to get their perfect meals, which will meet the standards of their needs. Moreover, the onboard shop is also stocked with some extra comforts such as chocolates, cookies, and various soft drinks. This ensures that each vessel meets the needs of every single sailor aboard. But what about special religious holidays? As is the custom for the United States Navy, each person, regardless of their religion, will be accommodated. Aboard an aircraft carrier is usually a chapel or multiple chapels depending on the specific vessel. During religious holidays, a chaplain will be conducting services throughout the day, allowing each person to visit when it meets their own specific schedule. This ensures overall inclusivity while appeasing every member aboard one of these vessels. For those who have to perform these duties like cooking and giving a service in the chapel, you might think they don't get to enjoy the festivities. However, the Navy works with numerous crew members, and they work in shifts. These shifts allow each person to share in the festivities. But being aboard an aircraft carrier during special holidays is not for everyone. In fact, it is hard to see your friends and family have a great time while serving the country. So the Navy takes every measure possible, while keeping combat readiness to ensure that this is one of the best days of the year for sailors. But do you think you'd be able to survive a 9-month stint aboard a U.S. aircraft carrier?